What's going on, guys? This is Miasin. So we are getting a new set in the TCG in like 4 days or something. And because of that, I really wanted to make a video on what might very well be the best deck from that set. And one of the best decks from the year as well, which is Centurion. Now, what is interesting about Centurion is the fact that it's probably one of the best decks at being able to play with one single card and not having to play any bricks or garnets in it. I mean, as a matter of fact, the only monster in your engine that isn't like a one-card starter is the Emmet 6, which is this level 8 monster right here, but you can easily just play one copy of it, so it's not really the end of the world. And the engine is extremely compact, allowing you to play a lot of utility cards, such as hand traps or other engines, or potentially board breakers or floodgates. This deck is very good at playing Scale Drain, and there can only be one because all of your monsters for the most part have different types. You've got the Primera, which is a spellcaster monster. Trudea is a pyro monster, which also makes it searchable by Bonfire, which we're getting in January, by the way. And then the Emmet 6 is a machine, and your Legatia is a machine. And then you got some Synchro Dragons in your extra deck, as well as some other things. Now, I will be honest, I was expecting that deck at first to be like extremely good even in the OCG. And for some reason, it wasn't seeing much play in the OCG. But it is still topping, some events every now and then. Like, as you can see here, it got second place at the CCT in China, which is, pretty good. The Horus Centurion build, and then in a Malaysia tournament, it also got second place, Horus Centurion. Again, very similar concept, just with like a bigger Horus engine. The Centurion package is pretty much the exact same. One monster that doesn't do much, and then maxing out on every good card. And then there's also a pure Centurion deck that managed to top the YCS in Japan. Very minimalistic, so 2 Emmet 6 with 6 other Centurion monsters, but no Horus cards. And then Nadir Servant package, because this deck can use Nadir Servant very, very well. It can send the Despian Lulu Walilith, which is this level 12 monster. And during the end phase, you get to special summon a Spellcaster monster from your deck. Well, Light Spellcaster, whose attack and defense are the same. And your Primera, your one-card starter, just happens to be a Spellcaster with these stats. So you always have more gas, and you can also use Nadir Servant to crack boards going second, which is not too bad. And the extra deck is very loose, so you can play a lot of super poly targets, which makes this card even better in this deck. And you can also play Ghost Reaper and other things, Dogmatica Punishment, because even though this deck does have some really explosive combos, again, with one single card, the goal is to summon Centurion Legatia, and then Synchro Summon Crimson Dragon into Hot Red Dragon and King Calamity on your opponent's turn. Every single deck can do that, every single build, and if the King Calamity cannot work, then you can still go into Cosmic Blazar Dragon. So this can be a thing in case your opponent figures out a way to always make your Hot Red Dragon or King Calamity miss timing. So for example, if he goes like Book of Moon on your Crimson Dragon, you can't tag out to summon King Calamity, obviously, because Crimson Dragon's effect to summon the King Calamity always has to be Chainlink 1 if you want the King Calamity to resolve, because it has to be the last thing to happen, it's summon. So yeah, but anyways, today I will be talking a bit about this deck, and of course I will also be showing you guys my own take on the Centurion deck. I was able to fix it, because I do believe that this deck does have some inherent flaws. And if you don't really work on them, this deck might be less good than what it really is. Anyways, before we proceed, a friendly reminder, of course, to smash the like and subscribe button, and now let's get right into it. So, again, as you can see here, everything, every single deck list that I'm showing you guys, they all have something in common, and that's the fact that they're playing a lot of hand traps. And it might be the reason that these decks are just not doing well enough, even though they're doing okay. Like, the Centurion deck is fine, but it just isn't good. It's not good enough, because when you see like a one-card combo deck that can do so much, like pretty much almost skip your opponent's turn and then have a crazy follow-up because you just keep generating advantage, you're even summoning the Primera on your opponent's turn, you always have a way to play for next turn. This deck should be doing much better, and I believe I was able to fix that by swapping the hand traps for probably better cards, while still having a very good going second and an even better going first. And here it is. Here is my deck profile. So as you can see, I'm only playing 7 monsters. No hand traps, no Horus cards, even though you could very well play the Horus engine. It definitely doesn't suck. It does play a little more into Droll and Ash, because this deck actually does not lose to Droll whatsoever. As a matter of fact, you have, again, all of your one-card starters. You could get Drolled on any of them, and the only difference is that your Legatia will not be drawing one card. The only way that Droll can hurt you is either after Terraforming or Pot of Prosperity. That's it, that's all. There is no other timing to get jeweled. As long as you get to resolve the Primera to search the field spell, or if you already have the field spell and you already have one of the other monsters, then, well, I mean, if you have any of these 9 cards again, Joel does not do anything. But I mean, if you have to go terraforming for the field spell, you can still play through Joel if you have a hard draw on one of these cards, because this card is pretty much like a special summon from deck almost. But it bypasses Ash because you're placing a monster from your deck in the spell and trap zone, and then you're summoning it. Ash is actually very bad against this deck, and technically this deck does lose to Ghost Ogre, but maybe not on the field spell, because you can actually play around it. If you go field spell and then activate effect, your opponent chains Ghost Ogre and then you chain Emblema of Oath, or you just summon a Centurion monster beforehand and then use the effect of the field spell, because it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while you control a Centurion monster card. And again, monster card means not necessarily a monster, it just means as long as the physical card is a monster card, even in the spell and trap zone, it still would protect your field spell, so that's pretty nice. And yeah, this engine does not have to be big, you don't have to play hand traps because board breakers are also just as good, and floodgates are extremely good going second. So yeah, I'm obviously playing 1 Emmet 6, and then 3 Primera, 3 Trudea, and then the terraforming with the 3 field spells, 3 Pot of Prosperity, and then for the other engine cards, Emblem of Oath. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13 1-card starters, and then 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. This deck is so incredibly consistent because, again, you don't have to rely on a lot of cards, and you have a, you have an 87.73% chance of opening one of your 13 1-card starters. But because of Pot of Prosperity, this likelihood increases by, I believe, around 6%. So the real consistency of this deck is close to like 94%. And even when you don't draw your starters, it's not the end of the world because it's not like you're breaking on bad cards and hand traps. You're breaking on floodgates that allows you to stay in the game, which is actually quite relevant because you can break boards with a combination of like there can only be one skill drain, or like skill drain Solemn Strike and stuff like that. It's actually very nasty, and a lot of decks don't really interact very well with trap decks. So even though they would have a lot of monster negates and stuff, you can still navigate your way through just about anything. Now, your own skill drain does not hurt you if you know what you're doing, and it's actually quite easy to play around your own skill drain. You can use the effect of the field spell in order to quick sync even on your own turn. So you can go like summon your Primera and then effect a search and then chain the field spell in order to synchro summon so that you sync and then you still search with the Primera. And once you summon the Centurion Legatia, it has a 3500 attack, so you are playing the better beat down monster, and your deck will basically never lose a skill drain battle. There Can Only Be One is very similar because, again, you got 3 monsters of different types in your main deck, so Pyro, Spellcaster, and Machine, and the best monster in your extra deck is a Machine. The worst case scenario is if you have to rely on the Emmet 6 in order to summon the Legatia, but you can still use Primera and Trudea because Trudea does have the ability to become level 8 when you summon it, so it's never really a problem. So yeah, you can still summon your boss monster, quote-unquote, with these 2 monsters. And this deck is probably the most correct way to play through hand traps because if you are getting hand trapped to death, you don't want to, like, just pass on your own hand traps and then the half of a board. Like, you know, some Centurion monsters that would maybe summon Legatia on the opponent's turn but not go for the King Calamity and then rely on hand traps to survive, because then you can get Zeused and then you're basically on top deck mode with just a bunch of hand traps and it doesn't really get you there. So you really want to play floodgates that ensure that if you go first, you win the game 100%. And these trap cards that I'm playing are really good. Infinite Impermanence is the only one that I'm playing because it doesn't really... It has all the benefits of, you know, just generic traps while not having the drawbacks of hand traps and still having the benefit of hand traps. So obviously, you can draw it for turn and it's still good. You can play around the Call by the Grave and Triple Tactic Talents and Thrust. As a matter of fact, this is also one of the goals of this deck, to never allow your opponent to turn on Triple Tactic Talent and Thrust, because that is one way to lose this format, unfortunately. If you play Ash, Droll, and Nibiru, it's just doesn't necessarily play very well in your favor, but Imperm is very safe, so that's a really good one. And then 2 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison is just a decent card, but you can replace it with something else. 2 Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon, just a good way of dealing with Expurli Noir and monsters that are unaffected by card effects. 1 Centurion Phalanx as my trap card that I can search with the Primera. This card is probably a little better than the Omni Negate, the Truth Centurion. What I like about this card is that it is always a card that does something even without having to rely on your engine. And it also has a very neat graveyard effect that you can use in order to revive back your Legatia. And also this card revives back a Centurion Synchro monster. And right now Legatia is the only one, but this hints that the deck will get even more support in the future. So investing in this deck right now could be actually a very good investment, because I think it's just a matter of time before this deck becomes like, a true threat to everyone. I think it's already good enough to like actually honestly win YCSs. Anyways, 3 there can only be 1. I'll re-explain why it's so good. 3 skill drain, 3 solemn strike. It's just insane. Like, you can negate everything with this card practically, because monster effects and summons are just like some of the best things that you can negate, honestly. And then Solemn Judgment, which is worse going second but better going first. So yeah, just these two complement each other very well. Yeah, obviously you're never trying to play more than 40 cards in these kind of decks. And the beauty about playing 7 monsters in your main deck is that you can actually technically fit in Card of Demise, which is a very good card in top deck mode. And depending on what your board breakers are and stuff like that, you might just play a bunch of them and then play Card of Demise and then replenish your hand, so you can play like Ultimate Slayer, which is a very good card in this deck because the extra deck is not really tight. So if you want to play that over Super Poly, you can definitely go for that. And you can also play Duster main deck or Evenly main deck. Worst case scenario, if you tried going first, it's just your discard fodder for the field spell. So this deck does have the luxury of main decking every board breaker out there. There are a lot of ways to play this deck, and the reason why I'm making this video is because I truly believe that Centurion is an extremely good deck. It's just that people are playing it wrong. They're playing it as a 15 hand trap deck, which I think is completely incorrect. They should rather play it as a Floodgate deck or as a board breaker-esque deck. Just like Flunderies, at first people were playing a bunch of hand traps in Flunderies. They were playing like DD Crow that you could search with a Robina, and then people were slowly realizing that playing Dark Ruler main deck and then Evenly, and then all the board breakers in the world were how you were breaking boards and winning going second with Flunderies, because going first all you need is 1 card anyway, so it doesn't matter. For the extra deck, I'm playing 5 Super Poly targets, so Dragonite, Draco, Equist. This is very good against boards of like Baron de Fleur and Borload Savage Dragon. You got 1 Dragon Synchro and 1 Warrior Monster, so you can fuse for that. And then 1 Drago Stepelia, obviously pretty easy to summon, or Starving Venom. Guilty Gearfried for 2 warrior monsters with different attributes, so SP Little Knight and Baron de Fleur. Garura and Mudragon of the Swamp, the 2 best Super Poly targets, the easiest one to summon. And then we got, of course, the Cosmic Blazer Dragon and the Hard Ride Dragon or Twin King Calamity that we can summon with the Crimson Dragon. 3 copies of the Centurion Legatia, and then the Cyframe Lord Omega, 2 Typhon, but you could play 1 if you think that 2 is overkill. But again, going second, this is how you break boards. You go normal summon a Centurion, and then use the effect, and then bait an interruption, and then you go into Typhon, you bounce back something, you jump over something, and then you go set 5 pass, and then you grind the game out. And the second Typhon is there because your opponent might just have to waste a lot of resources to go over like your initial board break, and then you just go for the second Typhon. They don't see it coming, and then they lose. So it's really good at just catching people off guard, because nobody's really going to play around the second Typhon. And then Azalea, because this deck is probably not going to be summoning SP Little Knight very easily. And Azalea, if I recall correctly, is one of the only outs to Gozen match in this deck. If you are using 2 Trudea, then at least you can out that, because there's really no other way of outing Gozen match. So yeah, it's one of the floodgates that actually kill you. Even Rivalry is really good, but Rivalry, there's straight up no outs, because if you, I mean, there might be one, but I mean, you would have to use like 2 Primera or 2 Trudea, but I don't think that leads to anything. 2 Pyro Monsters, 2 Spellcasters might lead to this. No, actually, that doesn't do anything. Yeah, so yeah, you're kind of screwed if you know, that happens. But yeah, obviously that's it for the extra deck. And now for the idea section, a bunch of cards. If you want to play the second M at 6, you can do that. And then Fenrir, but I don't recommend it, because then you start losing to Nibiru. Like I said, this deck does not lose to Nibiru or Droll or Ash. There's very little that you can Ash. Like, there's only the Primera or Prada Prosperity. That's it. There's really no other cards in this whole deck that are Ashable whatsoever. Oh, wow, yeah, you can Ash the Joa 1 from Legatia. Ooh, it hurts me so much. Yeah, so Ash kind of sucks against this deck. Valor and Imperm are the exact same. They're just very low impact. Ghost Ogre can be good. Cosmic Cyclone is actually better than any other hand trap, because you can Cosmic the field spell, and that way you know for a fact that they're not going to be a quick sinking on your turn, which is relevant, because even if they're just making a Legatia on your turn, they're still drawing 1 card and then destroying one of their monsters with the highest attack. So it's still something. It's the Magistus engine in your extra deck, but it's a big commitment. So you can't play a Super Poly with that. You can summon a monster that's kind of like a D-barrier if you have the appropriate Magistus extra deck monster equipped to it. So if you've got like a fusion monster equipped to it, like this one, your opponent cannot activate the effect of fusion monsters and stuff like that, so it's actually pretty good. And then I already talked about the Nadira Servant package. I played that before anyone else, and the OCG started playing it, so that's actually really nice. And then, of course, Scarlet Rajac Archfiend, if you want to burn your opponent. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, just more synchro monsters. And then the two Magistus guys. Chaos Archfiend kind of sucks, honestly, but it does have a decent effect, and not really. Zeus, which you're probably never going to summon. Baguska, Exciton Knight. Again, more Magistus cards. And here is where it gets kind of spicy, actually. So even though Card of Demise is a one-of, cards that are spells or normal spells or normal traps are no longer, like, unsearchable one-ofs by definition, because you can technically always get your hands on them with triple tactic thrust. And if you're playing 2 copies or 3 copies of thrust with prosperity, your odds of finding Card of Demise would be a little higher, but obviously a Card of Demise and prosperity don't work with each other. And this deck doesn't have to special summon on your own turn. You can actually special summon on your opponent's turn, because you've got a lot of ways to play on your opponent's turn. So that's the beauty of Card of Demise. It's a card that allows you to easily come back into the game, evenly matched again, and then the Truth Centurion, which is kind of like the solemn judgment for this deck. But yeah, again, I really do believe that this deck is extremely good. This deck might actually be the best deck, and might potentially be the next tier 0 deck because of how consistent and how powerful it is. One single card gets you there. It's not a slow control deck whatsoever. You're seeing a lot of floodgates, but these cards are, I mean, just really good cards going second, so that's the reason why they're here. And if in case your 1-card combo doesn't go through, you still ensure that you win with your floodgates. So as long as you're not playing against a deck like Labyrinth, then you're good to go, because Labyrinth obviously doesn't care about scale drain, and even there can only be one, they can kind of navigate their way through it, but you can still grind it out, so it's not the end of the world. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.